Here is the latest show of desperation from the Israeli state as accountability finally comes knocking for some of the worst atrocities committed in the 21st century, in a genocidal onslaught which has offered yet more evidence of the human capacity for depravity, as if the dark history of our species did not already have enough. Now, for days, there have been rumours swirling that the International Criminal Court is about to finally issue arrest warrants against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his Defence Minister Yoav Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in the course of Israel's onslaught against Gaza. You may recall that requests for those arrest warrants were issued on the 20th of May this year. That is 123 days ago, approaching 18 weeks ago, by the ICC Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan. A recap there. The process is that those requests have to be approved by 3 judges in the ICC's pre-trial chamber who hail from France, Romania and Benin. There have been repeated attempts to sabotage this process, not least by the Conservative former government of the United Kingdom here, before it was defeated in the general election, which submitted an utterly vexatious attempt at derailment, despite the terrible inadequacies of Keir Starmer's Labour government, including on Palestine. They at least thankfully dropped that particular wrecking attempt, though the bar really is on the floor, abiding by international law, not trying to wreck it. Now, indeed, just so you don't think I'm being kind of ungrateful here, today's Guardian reports that number 10, that is, the seat of power here in the UK, has been on alert for a week now about imminent arrest warrants, and that they fear that the ICC will expect the British government to support those warrants. Oh, the indignity of it all. Having to support international law as a signatory nation to the ICC, and a government which presents itself as being full of integrity and respecting the rule of law, having to be consistent, having loudly, rightly backed the ICC arrest warrant against Vladimir Putin and trumpeted the importance of international law in that context. Poor old British government. Honestly, though, what Starmer's government is briefing is truly desperate. They say that this support would need to be offered at a time when Britain hasn't prescribed Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in the UK. What? Why is that relevant? I'm certainly no fan of Iran's regime, but Britain hasn't prescribed the Israeli Defence Forces, or Mossad either, if we're going to go down that route, despite the murderous rampages they've been on, either. There is a term for what you're hearing there from the British government, and that is called whataboutery. You are asked to consider an issue on its own merits, which is in this case the International Criminal Court, which you, the British government, are signatory to, deciding that the level of evidence which exists that the Israeli state has committed war crimes and crimes against humanity is so high that legal proceedings have been issued. And because you find that fact terribly inconvenient and embarrassing, you go, well, what about Iran? Look over there. What about those guys? It's also stupid because the UK already has extensive sanctions in place against Iran anyway. See, there you go, British government. Just say that. I've sorted out your line for you. You don't have to pay me, don't worry. I'll just take, I'll accept thanks in the form of just abiding by international law, to be honest. The article says the concern here is that what is described as the large anti-Iranian lobby inside Parliament will say this is the wrong priorities by the UK because they're seeing the arrest of the leader of a democratic state, or the attempt to arrest the leader of a democratic state, when the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps isn't prescribed. I mean, first of all, Israel is subjecting over 5 million Palestinians across the occupied territories to a military occupation they object to against their wishes, against their consent, the longest belligerent occupation in modern human history. In fact, there's nothing democratic about that tyranny. It isn't experienced as democracy, it is experienced as tyranny. So calling Israel a democratic state is a stupid nonsense. And also, what matters here isn't the domestic nature of a state, it is whether it's committing war crimes and crimes against humanity, which incidentally it is on a mass scale. You can't go, well, we've got elections amongst our local population, who the polls incidentally show are gripped by genocidal mania. So that means we can't be committing war crimes against Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. How does that even make sense? How does one follow from the other? What they're spinning in their briefings, as per this very useful article, is that they're, and I quote, most concerned by the explosive political fallout the ICC issues an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, especially at such a moment of extreme tension in the Middle East. Yeah, that's definitely it, isn't it? That's definitely what's worrying them. It's nothing to do with the fact that the British state is a key ally of Israel, that leading figures in this British government, and what was then the official opposition, publicly legitimised Israeli war crimes from the very outset of this horror, and the issuing of arrest warrants will thereby damn them as well, because they, too, are leaders here in Britain will face public shame for their own complicity, not least given that complicity continues in government. There was some fanfare over the suspension of some British weapons the other week, but it was over about 8% of total arms sales. The British government continues to give Israel key material to prosecute this genocide, not least the sale of parts for F-35 jets, which rain death and destruction on the people of Gaza. And there are legal proceedings in place against the British government. I've interviewed those behind that, those brilliant lawyers. And indeed, David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, has been written to notifying him of his potential criminal liability given the continued sale of F-35 jets, which are complicit in war crimes, or facilitating, actually enacting war crimes. They can't say they didn't know, you see. That's the point about these letters. You tell them there's a public record at the time which states what's happening, so then they can't go in the future, we didn't know. Yeah, you did. You know exactly what's going on. That's why they're worried, because they're worried about liability in the future. These people are going to be around for decades alive. They don't know. I mean, they're thinking, how could this end up panning out, given the scale of the crime? Even if they're arrested in 10 or 20 or 30 years, which is plausible, I think, by the way. Anyway, Israel clearly got wind of the fact the ICC is imminently poised to issue arrest warrants. That's because they are almost spying on everything the ICC does. And indeed, they have a history of attempting to blackmail and intimidate the ICC, which I've covered in a previous video. It is my strong belief that they will be absolutely up to all sorts of shenanigans with the ICC now, which I think will come out in the years to come. Now, Israel today issued an official challenge to the jurisdiction of the ICC, as well as the legality of the prosecutor's arrest warrant request. They've clearly waited until the last minute, hoping this will delay things. They're relying on two well-rehearsed ruses here. One is that the ICC doesn't have jurisdiction because Israel did not sign up to it. Well, tough luck, buddies, because Palestine did. And unfortunately, you didn't manage to scrub Palestine out of existence, did you? Though not for want of trying. And the ICC has jurisdictions for war crimes committed in Palestine by anyone. And that includes you, Israel. Two, they claim Israel is a democracy with an independent and respected legal system. What they're going on here is the question of complementarity, which is the fact that the ICC only has a mandate to act if it's judged that the state in question does not have the capacity through its own legal system to properly hold to account those who are accused. The idea that Israel is ever going to hold to account Netanyahu or Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for war crimes or crimes against humanity is a very bad joke. They've consistently let soldiers off the hook for obscene war crimes. The idea they're going to properly legally hold to account their own leaders is an insult to everyone's intelligence. I know it, you know it, everyone knows it. Now, Adil Haq, a professor of law at Rutgers University, a distinguished leading legal expert, has taken this nonsense apart in the spurious nonsense in an important thread. He points out the deadline to request leave to submit amicus observations expired on July 12th, and approved observations on 6th of August. Another challenge would need to be only issued when an investigation or prosecution has begun, that is, after arrest warrants have been issued. Under other relevant legal articles, they would need to be at the earliest opportunity. Now, he says, Adil Haq, the arguments described appear wrong on the merits, but the court should reject these briefs as procedurally improper. Let's hope the court does this promptly and finally issues these arrest warrants. But in the meantime, those hideous, abominable war crimes only continue every single day. Footage emerged on Thursday of Israeli soldiers throwing 3 Palestinians from a rooftop during a raid in the West Bank. You see one blindfolded being thrown from a roof. I've seen it. I'm not going to share it here. I don't know whether they'd already been executed or whether they were still alive. One seemed to outstretch his arms as he fell. Whether they are alive or dead, this is a war crime. If dead, you are forbidden from desecrating the bodies of the dead. Remember when we were told routinely that Hamas threw people from roofs and this was evidence of their depravity? There's actually no evidence of this happening. It's not to justify Hamas, just a fact on this particular question. We do know that ISIS threw people from roofs. They're very famous for that. And was that not offered rightly as central evidence of the utter barbarism of ISIS? And yet this is the Israeli army, armed and backed by our governments, the allied army of the West, once again, in full view of the world, committing some of the worst war crimes of our age. Today they've been bombing Lebanon again, reportedly killing several children. Not content with slaughtering Palestinian kids, they're back to butchering Lebanese kids too. Well, the ICC must act. And when they do, it's not just those who supported this abomination who must be held to account. I said this all the way through this. Those who stayed silent in positions of influence, apart from platitudes and hand-wringing, they too must be held to account. You see, those who did nothing when they had a platform, when they had the power to do something about one of the worst crimes of our age, well, they too are culpable. And all the way through history, the lesson we always need to learn is it is the silent who play a pivotal role in allowing monstrous atrocities to be committed. If they stopped being silent and they spoke out and they did something, these atrocities would never be possible. Please like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts and your comments. Keep the show on the road at patreon.com/ownjersey4. Listen to podcasts. Two things. Firstly, we do our annual Going to Labour Party Conference and Conservative Party Conference videos next week. So next Wednesday, I think we release the one from the Labour Party Conference. I will be talking partly about Gaza and Palestine. I'll be challenging as best I can the politicians there in the British government, as well as Labour Party members, about the role of their government. I've been talking about a project for a long time, and it has taken so much effort and resources. You'll see what I mean. I can't say more, unfortunately, still. I know I keep saying this, and you're like, what is this? Just, yeah, I wish I could, it has to be just right. Everything has to be in place. You'll see what I mean. I think you'll appreciate it. I hope so. I'll speak to you soon.